Welcome to Seminar Sundays. Tonight our theme is club officer roles and the selection of officers and the duties of each role. This will be the first time that we're using Zoom for our Seminar Sundays. This is a bit of a trial run. We'll be doing it again next week, and depending on the success of this week and next, we may continue using Zoom going forward. So welcome to the Seminar Sunday. Now, as I said, this session is on club officer roles, and I am going to be walking you through a number of slides on that. I am going to make this more interactive as much as possible, or as interactive as possible during the meeting. So I appreciate your attendance and your participation for that. Just as a reminder, elections are supposed to be held at the club officer at the first meeting in May, according to the policies and bylaws of Toastmasters International. So new officers are supposed to be taking office by July, obviously on July 1st, but the elections are supposed to take place the first meeting in May. So that's as a reminder. That's why we're having this Seminar Sunday today, specifically about that, to give you a little bit of background on what the club officer roles are. To help you out, I have put together a quick summary as to what those club officer roles are. Now, as we all know, that there are the 7 key roles, and I'm just going to open this up and make sure you got, from an audio point of view, please jump in. And I noticed that there are the people who are on the call currently, and you guys can unmute yourself. What are your club officer roles? Do you have a club officer role currently, or what roles have you filled in the past? So we'll go with Giadon, or Jim. Jim, go ahead. You were first up.
Okay, I'm doing VP Ed for my club right now.
Okay. And what other roles have you had in the past?
None.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. Lisa.
Currently, I'm VP Education. I've had all the roles.
Okay. And Giadon, I don't know if you're able to unmute yourself. If you are, can I just unmute you just to see if I can hear you? Giadon.
Hey.
Hi.
Sorry. I was the president of the club, but not right now. Sorry, I answered wrong.
No problem. As long as you were, no, the question was, have you been, or are you?
Yeah, I was, yeah.
Great, excellent, thank you. So I've got, Lisa was everything, Giadon has been president, and Jim, you've been VP Ed. So we'll just go from there. So we're going to cover all of the roles, especially if you're president, but I just want to go through all the roles. This is being recorded, so we want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to hear this at another time, at a later time. I'm going to go through the roles in an order that, to me, makes the most sense, and that is taking a look at it from the guest point of view and the member involvement point of view. The first person that the guest might come in contact with is the VP Ed. Now, I've summarized some of the responsibilities here. And I'd like to get your feedback on some of these things. What is the most, for those of you who either have been, and I know that that would be Lisa, and for those who have been responsible for the VP Public Relations, what is your thoughts about what is the most important skill and responsibility that they have for that role?
I would say keeping the club meeting information current. Like where are the clubs meeting, the hours that they meet.
And where should that be kept current? And what?
On the web page, as well as on any promotional materials that are out there.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to jump in, just weigh in, just to add some additional points here. To me, and I have been a VPPR. That was my first role within Toastmasters, first club officer role. And to me, the social media and the website were absolutely the most important. Now, some clubs operate as a corporate environment, and their participation, what they would do is not necessarily through social media, but their publications would be internal websites within the company. And other clubs don't necessarily have a lot of following through social media, and what their focus is to drive through using bulletin boards at wherever they meet. For example, if they meet in a community center or in a public library or some place that's open to the public, then they take advantage of that public presence to make sure that they publicize. One of the key things that I found is that if you're in a place that is open to the public, having something like a sandwich board out front so that as people come in to use the facility for whatever reason that they currently go there for, they can see right away that there's a Toastmaster meeting going on inside. There's also bulletin boards that sometimes within community center, or often within a community center. And that's a good place to put up small posters. And when you're actually having the meeting, is again, either have a bulletin, either have a sandwich board outside, or have a banner or something that faces outside of the room itself, so it also faces to the public transportation or movement areas, so that they can see coming in that there is a club meeting taking place and what that is. And usually people are interested, and they either will sneak in, or they'll attempt to come earlier at a future date and come into the meeting before it starts, because it draws a little bit of interest about what's going on inside the meeting. So those, to me, are some really good opportunities to take advantage of people in the general public. Okay. So the first off is to make sure that we have that visibility there. And if the guest has that visibility, knows about the club, that's a good thing. So they know that the club exists, but also making sure that the guest understands what the club is for and what it's all about. And that's where the brand image is really important. And safeguarding the Toastmasters brand is really critical, because it helps clarify what's going on within the club and what Toastmasters is trying to achieve. And when they go to Toastmasters International, they don't get confused about what the message is, because they can see that it's fairly clear there that we are a communications program that helps build leaders. And we want to make sure that we do that, but we're always talking about the Toastmasters brand. And that's a key responsibility of the VPPR. And we shouldn't underestimate that. I was in some club meetings recently where they referred to the members as communicators rather than Toastmasters. And it bothered me, and I was wondering what about that bothered me. And I always referred to them as Toastmasters and not as communicators. And I realized that we want to make certain that that brand is protected. And we are Toastmasters. We're not quote unquote communicators. While we may be communicating, that's not what we should be referred to as officially. We should be referred to officially as Toastmasters. And that's another way to protect the brand. All right, so that's the VPPR role. I'm going to move on to the next one in the series, which is the Sergeant at Arms. And the reason why I put this one second is that when a guest finds out about Toastmasters, they find out through the VPPR that the club exists and that there's a meeting that takes place at a certain time and date, and that gets them to come in the door. The VP, or the Sergeant at Arms, his responsibility is clearly listed here to tend to the club property, coordinate club meetings, and there's some skills there that we're looking for to be punctual and professional. I'd like your input on what other things the Sergeant at Arms is responsible for, especially when it comes to that guest experience. And if you'd like to chime in, feel free. I'll give you guys a few seconds to unmute, comment. Yes, Jim.
So these are the people that provide the agendas to the meeting, provide any speech review papers. At our club, Jay always has individually cut out pieces of paper so you can do your review of any speeches that are happening. He provides a grammarian report template. He provides the timer report template. We've got a little timer report template so we keep track of stuff. It's just general sort of paper. He comes in with a weird little paper timing device. And the room is always set up before the meeting. And he always gets great commendations for the punctual and consistent way he delivers on that task. So that's how the Sergeant at Arms functions at our club.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Jim. Lisa, did you have a comment you wanted to add?
The Sergeant at Arms at our club definitely makes sure the meeting room is set up for us and ready to go long before we start our meeting. We have guest packages prepared for any guests that may come in the door. Any ribbons or voting slips we are set out, as well as the evaluation forms are ready. And if we're getting low on supplies, to let the treasurer know that we need to order some TI supplies.
Excellent. Yes, these are excellent additional components of the role. Now, one of the things though that I wanted to express as a strong point, and I think I heard that from both you, Jim, and from you, Lisa. One of the key things is that they set the tone. So the setting up of the room, having everything organized, that's a pretty important and pretty significant role and responsibility. And it sends the message to the members and the guests that what the intent is of that meeting. Now, if it's fun and it's entertaining and if it's bubbly, it's great. It sends the message that it's going to be a fun and entertaining evening. If it's very strict and to the point and correct and make sure that it's professionally run, and it gives that professional image that it's going to be a professional meeting. And if they're dull and lackluster and they're just going through the motions, it tends to set a negative tone, or a tone that meeting may not be as exciting. So to me, the Sergeant at Arms is a critical cheerleader in making sure that the members and the guests, all the people that are in there, it sets the stage for how they're going to perceive the meeting from the start. Now, Giodong, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think it's also a time management, because the Sergeant at Arms will monitor time, start the meeting on time, and also after break, they will call people back to announce the meeting start again.
Exactly. So if you're looking for a Sergeant at Arms, I didn't do this on the VPPR. I did have a skill set in here. Let me just jump back to that for a moment. If you're looking for the skill set of the VPPR, I think to me one of the critical skills for VPPR is knowing and understanding and being able to comfortably use social media. So one of the purposes of this session is not just to understand the roles, but understand the skills that are necessary to be a good Vice President of Public Relations. And if you want to have a good VPPR, they should have that ability to work with social media. To be a good Sergeant at Arms, I think to be punctual and professional is going to be important, especially if you're having them set up the room in advance. You need to make sure that they're there beforehand and they're not just panic, arriving 2 minutes before the meeting starts and trying to rush through setting up the room, or having everyone else do that for them. Unless, of course, they've coordinated it, because the VP or the Sergeant at Arms doesn't actually have to set up the room if they have a team of people that are coordinating that. So it's one of the things that's important to note is that they don't have to be the first one there, but they do need to be there to make sure that it's all working. And they are responsible for making sure that the room is going to be set up properly and that the meeting at least kicks off in a professional manner. Now, I'm not sure if you guys have, if your sergeants at arms, if they launch the meeting, started off. In some clubs officially they have the president do that. In some clubs it may be a chair. The clubs that I belong to, for the most part, have the Sergeant at Arms who launches the meeting and who will ask everyone to turn off their cell phones and points out where the bathrooms are and so on, the emergency exits. But by doing so, they are setting that verbal tone for the meeting. So it's not just how the room looks and if it's prepared and set up, and if it's a scramble to get organized, which can look a little bit like pandemonium. So it's that whole image is really important. So you want to have someone who is both punctual and professional as far as how they're running that role. So after the guest has come into the club for the first time, brought in by the VPPR, and they've been greeted, or the room has been set up in such a way by the Sergeant at Arms that they have that initial feeling about the club itself, I like to look at the next person that's responsible for managing this process is the Vice President of Membership. Now, as we all know, all guests and all members are responsible for greeting the guest and making sure they feel welcome. The Sergeant at Arms could also be responsible for the greeter role, or there may be assigned by either the VP membership or by the Sergeant at Arms or by someone else who would make sure that the guest gets the information they need and is seated beside someone who's a somewhat more knowledgeable Toastmaster, so that they're not sitting by themselves and you have an opportunity to ask and answer questions. The Vice President of Membership, though, has that important role of making sure that they have that help manage that transition from a guest to a member, conducting some contests and having open houses and assisting guests and so on. So there's and processing membership applications. those are the general responsibilities of the vice president of membership. I'd like to then further go back to you and say, what do you see also as being critical as far as the responsibilities of the vice president of membership? And Jidong, you're off of mute, so why don't you jump in?
Yeah, I think that is very important for the VP of membership. Have the guest books ready. So when the guests come in, they want the guests to write down their contact information and then connect with the guests, follow up with them, and then, invite them to come more and eventually help them to become members. And I think that's very important. And also that the materials, if the club have any brochures or have whatever handouts, everything that including the club information, they should be given to the guests. And who will do that? I think maybe the membership can help to do that kind of things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, the making sure that the club, the guests get the information necessary to make a determination as to whether this is the right club or this is the right program for them is very important. One of the things that I did point out here is that there are membership contests that we run throughout the year. Toastmasters has various membership contests, and there's some going on right now. This is the time for the second renewal process. Membership renewals are supposed to be need to be done by the end of this month in order to meet Toastmasters expectations, but also to make sure that we're getting our memberships processed and we're able to determine who we've gotten for our members and make sure they're able to take advantage of all of the benefits of Toastmasters, including access to pathways and our other opportunities such as contests. So there's an important aspect to that, to make sure that the memberships are processed and helped out. And I think that making sure that process takes place and making sure that the guest experience is positive and that the ability to become a member is really important. That's being met. So one of the key skills that I see in order to be a successful vice president membership is to be a people person. They don't have to be, and that's something that, by the way, with all these skills that I have listed here associated with each of the roles, one of the purposes is this is a skill that you can develop. So with Toastmasters, we're experiential learning. So you don't have to be the best or have all of the skills necessary to do the role in advance. These are skills that you would develop if you are going to be successful in the role, and that's not a bad thing. So if people are not naturally people persons, that they are more reclusive or they're more introverted, by being a vice president of membership and being a successful one, you're forced into going out there and getting outside your comfort zone and talking to the guests and talking to people as they come in the door and trying to understand what they're looking for, and also try to help them identify, help them see where Toastmasters could help them achieve their goals and their expectations in life. So this is, to me, it's a good learning opportunity for that role for the role of vice president of membership, is that developing that people person skill, and having that in advance would make that job a little bit easier. So we've got we've identified guests, or at least got the message out to guests through the vice president of membership of public relations. They've come in the door and they've seen what Toastmasters meeting is like, the initial part of it, by having the doors open and having the Sgt At Arms set the stage. We've given them connection to a vice president of membership who will hopefully have provided them some information about what the club is and asking them what their needs are, so that they can help the guest identify what their needs are and how the club can help them meet that. So then they want to join. They sign up and fill out the membership form and provide the check. So our next step then, I guess, is to, if I can do this, is to hand over a check. Now, some clubs do this differently. In some clubs, it is the treasurer who handles that. In some clubs, it's the vice president of membership that handles that. It is a mixed bag. I'd like to get the insight from you on the call. So if you'd like to jump in and just give your thoughts on who is it that is responsible for collecting the money from a guest who becomes a new member?
The treasurer is responsible for collecting the money and the dues from each of the new members that come in, and they pay them online at the TI site.
Okay, thank you. Jiadong and Jim, Jiadong, yes.
Yeah. In my club, actually, it's a membership. Collect the money for members.
Okay.
And the treasurer only spend the money.
That's great. That's one of each. So, Jiadong, yours is by the VP membership, and Lisa, yours is by the treasurer. And I've been belonging to clubs that work either way as well. Sometimes it's by the vice president membership, sometimes by the treasurer. And it really doesn't matter. The responsibility for managing the money is with the treasurer. Now, it doesn't mean that they wouldn't have people collecting money. You could have people collecting money for things like the grammarian might be collecting money for fines for using filler words or for not using the word of the day. Some clubs do that. You could have other people collecting money for example, a contest or an open house where you may be charging for certain people for guests to come in, or you may be having an event of some sort for a contest where you may be charging people to come in. So there's some opportunity to bring in money, and you don't have to have that organized by the treasurer, but the money would eventually have to go into the bank account, and that needs to be managed by the treasurer. Now, one of the other things that the treasurer is absolutely responsible for is paying the membership dues to Toastmasters International, make sure that money gets provided to them. Again, this could be done by the vice president of membership. So the vice president of membership may actually collect the checks and collect the payment and make the payment directly to Toastmasters International. But the responsibility to make sure that's done is by the treasurer. And probably the most important aspect or responsibility of the treasurer is to make sure that they have a budget. They put together a budget. The budget is reviewed by the club executive, and then the club itself votes to approve the budget. So there's 3 steps there. The treasurer needs to put together the budget, typically based on previous year's experience about what their spends are going to be. Sometimes it's just quite simple, especially if they're in a corporate environment where they don't pay rent, or there is a group that they don't, where the membership dues are being collected by the company. So that makes it very simple. But in other situations, mostly in community clubs where you have to pay rent and you have events going on throughout the year, that there's a lot of transactions, and putting together a budget that reflects all of that, including buying supplies, which I think I heard Lisa someone talked about earlier, was buying supplies and making sure you have the supplies for the Sgt At Arms. That those costs need to be put into the overall budget. So it's not necessarily a simple task. It's not complicated, but to have that first stage is for the treasurer to put the budget together, and then to present it to the club officers, the club executive for approval, and then present it at a club meeting, preferably early in the club calendar year. So it would be sometime before the end of September is when those budgets should be put in. So the treasurer would take office on July 1st, and then over the summer put together a budget and have that presented and voted on by the club membership, preferably before the end of September. So they have a budget now that takes until the end of July or end of June, and potentially with a carryover what any plans that they might have in the summertime, if they haven't budgeted for it, that they are understanding what that might be. So that's a pretty important responsibility. Now, I put down some skills that I thought were important. I said being trustworthy and having money management skills. I have been in a club where the treasurer purportedly ran off with some of the money, embezzled the club out of some money, and it's something that you do have to watch out for. So there are certain things that we highly recommend, and actually I think it's a requirement that you have at the club level, is that there's a minimum of 2 signatures required to issue a check. And it should not be that it typically should be that 3 people have signing authority, so that if one person's away, you can still pay bills. You should not have a president or someone else who has signing authority pre-sign a bunch of checks so that the treasurer doesn't have to go and search for those signatures, try to get them. because that defeats the whole purpose of having two signatures. And that's an important thing to really bear in mind. Having two people sign a check means that you have accountability for what's taking place, and having a third person being able to sign eliminates or reduces significantly the problem that there's only one person available to sign. If you have a lot of people who travel a lot, I would recommend having 4 people with signing authority, and that way any 2 can sign a check, and that should help alleviate the problem. And the banks are usually more than willing to support that. And I'm not sure if anyone else has any experience with some challenges or difficulties or good experiences with having treasurers and getting checks signed. Anyone want to comment on that?
I want to comment a little bit about the treasurer's job on my club too, because once we have guest speakers, we would like to give the guest speaker a gift. So when that coming, then sometimes we don't need to ask the members to vote how much money we will give a guest speaker. Most of the time, I think the president and the treasurer will make that decision.
Yeah, is it in the budget in advance though? See, one of the things that you should have is you should put in the budget that you're going to have, that you expect to have some guest speakers, and that you're going to have, you need to have a budget for some gifts.
Yeah. So like those gifts, it's really depending on the president and the treasurer to decide how much money that we give to them.
Okay, right. And so that should be set early in the years and it's established in the budget. So you allocate that money in the budget, so you know that that's what's going to come forward. And then throughout the year, if you actually, when those events do occur, then you have the opportunity to have that funds. You can draw on those funds to pay the bill. So yeah.
Oh, good.
That's a great idea. Anyone else have anything, any other suggestions for the treasurer?
In our club, we get the monthly bank statements. And so I think because we pay a lot of dues, a lot of money to our rental space, it's important to know where we're at as a club, and the treasurer can track that for us.
Right. Do you have that? Does the treasurer give a report on a monthly basis to the membership?
After we have a business meeting, the treasurer will present a report saying this is where we're at, this is how many dues I've collected, this is what's in the bank, just so the club knows where we're at.
And is that done monthly?
We haven't been doing it monthly this year. Generally, it is monthly, but not in this year.
Okay, no, but that's very good. To have that done on a regular basis is very, very good. Well done. I currently don't belong to a club that has that level of oversight, but they don't have a lot of money, but still, they should still do that. I think that that's a really important thing to do. So thank you for that. All right, so after the treasurer has collected the money or has made sure that somebody is responsible for collecting the money, next up is, in my circle of responsibility, is the Vice President of Education. And the reason why I have the Vice President of Education now is this person is now officially a member. They've joined, they've done the paperwork, they paid their membership dues, they're solid. So there's a lot of responsibilities that the Vice President of Education has. Now, Jim, I know that you're a Vice President of Education now, and I think, Lisa, you said that you're currently a Vice President of Education as well, right? I think so. Anyway, what I feel for you, because this is the most demanding job that exists within the club. And I encourage anyone who is a Vice President of Education to go out and get some assistance. And this is a critical thing to potentially do. If you have a lot of experience on doing it, then it's not as necessary, it's not as critical. But if this is your first time as Vice President of Education, this is a critical responsibility. There's a lot of tasks involved here. And that's why I wanted to point this out. It can be an onerous task to be a Vice President of Education if this is your first time. So, the basic things that are in here are coordinating the club schedule, assisting with the education awards, and that's making sure that people who've completed the awards get recognition. But I want to come back to that because there's a bigger aspect to it. being a base camp manager, coordinating and planning the speech contests, and managing the mentor program. So those are the major chunks of responsibility that the VP Ed has. Now, there's a lot of additional components within that assist with the education awards and being base camp manager. Those two are somewhat interconnected. So it's to make sure that every member is able to achieve their goals. And that's to understand what their goals are and to make sure that we're helping to coordinate the club schedule with the members' goals so that they get the opportunity to meet their goals by being able to take on the roles that will help allow them to do that. So that's from a club schedule point of view. But once they get those goals have been met, so example, completing a level 1 in pathways or completing a level, in whatever level they've completed, is to make sure two things happen. And those two things that are really important are to make sure that the person gets the ability to move forward beyond the level that they're currently in within pathways. So if they're at level 1, they've completed their level 1, but and they have acknowledged that they've completed level 1 within pathways, they can't move on to level 2 until the base camp manager has approved them that they've completed level 1. So that's an important critical step. So within pathways, the base camp manager has to approve or confirm that the member has completed that level before they're able to go on to level 2 or whatever level they're moving on to. So that's a critical component, and it's frustrating for the member not to be able to move forward, especially when they're on a roll. They've completed a level and they want to move forward. There usually is a level of excitement and anticipation, so they want to move on. If the vice president of education or if the base camp manager does not approve that relatively quickly, then what will happen is that the member will become frustrated. And this has happened to both myself and to my wife. Well, both of us have had this experience where we didn't get the approvals quickly, and I had to go to, and in different clubs, by the way, and had to go to the VP Ed and say, please approve it so I can move on. And sometimes it's taken a few weeks, but that can be frustrating. So it really is important to make sure that the base camp manager does that, which is why the base camp manager role is not assigned only to the vice president of education. The base camp manager is assigned to 3 different club officer roles. All become or all have access to the base camp manager responsibility. And that is, well, let me see, who would like to try to answer that question?
It's VPE, and isn't there another role that can do it as well?
Yes, there are 2 others.
The secretary and the president.
That is correct, Lisa. Very, very, absolutely. So all 3 of those people, all 3 of those roles, let me clarify. So it could be that there can be some overlap, but the president, the vice president of education, and the secretary all have access to the base camp manager responsibility. Effectively, they are all the base camp manager. There's one role called base camp manager. All 3 of those club officers have access to that role. Anyone care to guess why those 3?
I think because the secretary may have certificates and the president would present certificates to the club, in front of the club to the member.
That's a good aspect of it. Yes, that's right. Part of that is, that's correct, that there's around the certificates, but it's more than the certificates. First of all, the VP Ed is absolutely responsible for the base camp manager roles to make sure that the members are being able to move forward. That is their primary responsibility. They are the ones who are accountable for it. However, they may be away on vacation. They may be tied up with something else in a hospital. They may be just unavailable for whatever reason. So there is, who would naturally be a second person that would be responsible for knowing that the members themselves have completed an education level. To your point about the certificates or ribbons or things like that, the secretary should be recording. I know we're jumping ahead about what the responsibilities are for the secretary, but the secretary should be recording activities that happen within the club and within the club meeting, not just within the club executive as far as minutes go, but within the club activities. So they should be aware of who is giving what speeches, what roles are being completed by whom, for various reasons. Part of it is for the archives and for record keeping. part of it is because maybe the club has something like a Toastmaster of the Year award, and they want to reward those who have attendance or have completed certain roles, and they give a point system for that. The expectation is that the secretary should know who's doing what within the club meetings. They don't have to, but the expectation is that they should know that. And then ultimate responsibility for the members and for the club itself is with the president. So the president has responsibility overall. So they're deemed to be a good alternate to the vice president of education for the base camp manager role. So those are, generally speaking, why those three roles have it. Now, why everyone doesn't have it gets into a little bit more of an ownership responsibility issue. And they might get confusing as to people just putting people forward and allowing them to move forward without having completed the role. But we do want to make sure that they are able to move forward when they have completed it. But once a base camp manager has said that somebody has completed a level, what else needs to take place? What other recognition needs to take place for the individual?
Well, you want to celebrate the success of the member, right?
Yes, that is true. That's absolutely true. That's not quite the thing I'm looking for, but that is very true. You want to celebrate that. So you want to make sure that there's recognition. To your point about the certificates earlier, handing out a certificate at a club meeting to recognize that, maybe at least making it an announcement from the lectern saying that someone has achieved a certain level or completed a level within Pathways or within their legacy system. That's important. But I'm looking for something else as well.
Can you ask the question again?
So besides having a Pathways recognition to move forward within a path, what else needs to take place? And this is regardless of whether you're on a legacy system or within Pathways. What else needs to take place?
Is a club successful plan?
That is correct, Gia. So there is a club success plan. And how is that recognized? How is that captured?
We have the 10, what we call credits. So we have to monitor who achieved what. So for the club to earn the credits.
Now, do you know where that credit is captured?
It's for the education have 6 points, something like that.
Yeah, but you know how that's captured? How is that captured by Toastmasters International?
We go online to, we have to go online to apply for the credits. I don't know, there is a dashboard. I always check which club finished the work.
Okay, Lisa, I'll let you jump in on that one. You're a VP. You're a VP Ed this year.
Yes, the dashboard is online, and to follow and see how our club is doing.
How do you get how do you enter in that someone has completed a level or a legacy education goal?
We submit the education awards online.
And through what medium?
To the Toastmaster International website.
Okay, yeah, I was looking for a specific point, but yes. Okay, so you're talking about, I wanted to clarify, that is called the Club Central, and you submit you submit the education.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
That is not where a person is allowed to move forward within Basecamp from one level to another. That has to be done within Basecamp. So from a Pathways point of view, if they're working on Pathways, then there's 2 steps that have to happen for them to move forward and get recognition, and for the club to get credit for it. First off is that they have to be in Basecamp. The VP Ed, the president, or the secretary has to confirm that they've completed a level. That way the person is then able to move forward within Pathways, and they get within Pathways they're acknowledged that they have completed that, but the club doesn't get any credit at that point in time. The club gets credit only through Club Central, and the only people who have access to Club Central are, anyone care to guess?
The executive members.
The which?
The executive members?
Yes, the club executive. All club officers have access to Club Central, and anyone who has a role, has a club officer role, can go into Club Central and can confirm that somebody has completed an education award within Club Central. They can't confirm their own, but they can confirm any other club officer or any member of the club that they've completed it. Once that's done, then Toastmasters education awards get updated. The club gets a credit for that education award, and the member gets credit for that education award. And that's a really important thing to recognize, is that there are 2 steps. So recently I completed a level within Pathways, and probably about 2 weeks ago, and I went after the VP Ed at the club to make sure that I got credit. I got credit for it within, so I could move forward. I got it completed in Basecamp, but I still haven't gotten credit in Club Central. And I've requested the VP Ed to make sure that that I get the credit within Club Central, because the club needed that level 4 recognition for them to achieve one of their goals. And they haven't put that forward yet. So I'm anxious about that, because I want to make sure the club gets the goals, because the club should be select distinguished by now if they put forward a couple of the education goals that were completed, which they haven't done yet. They have been completed, but they haven't. The VP Ed hasn't put those in yet. So those are things that need to take place, and we need to make sure that those take place so that the club gets credit, the individual member who's completed that gets recognition, and in the case of Pathways, that the Basecamp manager has put people forward so that they can move forward. Otherwise, they're holding those people back, and that's a really critical role. As I said, that really needs to be made sure that we follow up on it. Anything else that anyone else have any other suggestions and add-ons to what the VP Ed needs to do? Yes, Gia.
Yeah, I just want to share with you about one of the club I visit. They have a very good record at the beginning of the year, and they write down each member's name and what they have achieved and what they haven't achieved. So they monitor during the year, and they will know who will help the club to earn a point. I don't know what they called, like with people's name, like a list, and they post on the wall. So every time when the club members come, they can see their progress themselves.
Right, those are the progress charts. I love those progress charts.
That code. Okay, I got you. Yeah. They put on the wall, and that's the first time I saw it. And I believe that if all the club, the vice president of educator can do that, that will help the club to succeed.
Absolutely.
At the end, yeah, it's a really good strategy.
Great, I like that idea too. And we did that at one of the clubs I was at. My wife was a VP Ed for a couple of years, and she used to give people stickers, and they could put the sticker on when they completed a level, and they loved it. It's like little kids, but they actually enjoyed doing it. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's kind of we can see our achievement, like each meeting we attended, you know what I mean? And we also can see other people's achievement, which inspire us too.
Right.
I think it's really good.
Right, I agree. Now, sorry, Lisa, were you or Jim, someone I saw was going to say something earlier?
I just had a question about how each club might set up their mentorship program and how well it's working for them.
How they might set it up?
Well, how they continue with it, I guess.
That's a good question. I've seen it all over the map. Usually it's haphazard, but the ones that I've seen that are really organized, they encourage people who have achieved a certain level to become a mentor, and then they ensure that they're matching those people up with new members. So a VP Ed usually is the person who does that, but they can have a person who will take on that responsibility and coordinate the two. Make sure that both the members who have some experience can do that, and that new members coming in, that they get to try to match up the skills. It's hard to match up the skills. It's a really good personal connection that you need to have, and sometimes the new member wants to have a certain person be their mentor, and sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. That's why it's good to have a separate person do that. Although if the VP Ed really likes doing that, then it might be a good fit. I haven't seen it. I mean, there's a lot of information on the mentor program, especially within Pathways. Pathways has a lot more critical requirements associated with the mentor program. And most of us Toastmasters aren't qualified to be mentors under the Pathways education program. So that we have to work our way into that and get our skill levels up in Pathways in order to be a decent mentor. It's going to be a challenge, but I think it's I think we're working towards the goal of having really good qualified mentors. Okay, I'm going to move on, though. I appreciate that input. I want to make sure that we get through the end and move to the secretary. Secretary role. The secretary, it's more than just taking notes and maintaining files, reporting new officers, and being a base camp manager. So that maintaining the files, I think, is the key area that I want to make a note of. Taking notes says, during the executive meetings, we're capturing who said what motions were made, and that it was approved, or that it passed or did not pass. And that's an important thing, because that's the business of the meeting. So that should take place at the executive and at the club level business meetings. So having that, capturing those notes and making sure we have that, and keeping those files for a longer period of time is really important. The reason, and then the reporting of new officers, that they have to do that once a year, and that's required for that one goal, that one Distinguished Club program goal of reporting the officers and the members, making sure that we have that in. That's one of their responsibilities. The reason, again, that I wanted to reiterate that the base camp managers, because they should know, by taking notes of what's going on during the meetings, they should know who has done what. It's a good responsibility to make sure that we know who has done what during the club meeting, so that we have that ability to have things like Toastmaster of the Year awards, if you're going to do those, but also so that you have someone to back up saying, yeah, the VP Ed is away, and this person says they completed 3 speeches in level 2. Did they complete them? Well, yeah, I was there, recorded, or somebody documented that. That's really important, so we have that. And I think the skill set that's required for that is to be a little bit meticulous, making sure that you're capturing the information and not letting it get lost or diverted from attention. Does anyone else have any other additional thoughts or comments on the role of the secretary, the responsibilities or skills?
Our club used to keep attendance. So when we noted people were away for a few weeks, someone would check in to see if there was some issues going on, why a member wasn't coming back, or if they were unhealthy or something was going on in their personal life. Just a check-in.
I like that. I like that a lot. I think that's an important aspect. That's very important. And I do like it when a club does it. Unfortunately, I don't think the clubs that I belong to right now are doing that. And it's that's a shame. I think having that information is very handy. All right, moving on. Last role, the president presides over the meetings, making sure that the club earns a Distinguished Club recognition. They lead and they guide, and they're a base camp manager. And to my opinion, and I was president 3 times in my Toastmaster career of 3 different clubs, I think it's the easiest job ever if you have a good team. And you have a good team by making sure that you support the people up front, help guide them and lead them. And there won't be people to drop off, and things happen. But if you have a fun team and people are having fun and you're doing a good job, generally speaking, if people leave and move on during the year, there will be people who will be willing to step up. So you shouldn't get stuck with having to do too much real work, and real work being the work that's done by the 6 other club officers. Now, I throw that out there because that's my opinion. I think leading can be easy once you're comfortable with it, once you know how to be a leader. I would like your input on that, especially those of you who've been club president before. I think Lisa said the president guides the leaders and the membership to success. Yeah, that's absolutely the case.
I think that you are right. If the president knows how to delegate the tasks to different officers and guide them properly, and I would say that motivate them to share the responsibilities, it will really help the club grow and the member retention.
Yep. Absolutely. It's got to be a fun thing to do this and to do these roles. And so you don't want to beat people up for not doing the best the best job ever. But if they're doing, a decent job, you should make sure that you give the recognition that needs to be there, and also making sure that people are just know that this is set the expectation and just help guide them along. And if things go sideways, they go sideways. You don't get too upset about it. Just work through the problems as they come along. All right, so those are the 7 roles, the 7 major roles or the 7 club officer roles. And the president is the one who does oversee and has a responsibility for overseeing all the things that take place. But the president is responsible to the members. So the president is not like isn't in charge of everything. The president is beholding to the members, and they have to recognize that the members vote on things. The members voted in the president, and the members are supposed to be there to approve anything that's beyond what the responsibilities are that have been set forward by the executive and by the president's leadership. So they're a servant of the members, and it's an important job and a critical job, and it's a strong leadership job. They have to understand that it's the members that are the important part there of the club. And the club officers are just filling in a role. I wanted to open it up for a couple minutes of question and answers. If you have any questions, feel free to jump in.
Hey, Jim here. What are some of the ways you've used to motivate people and keep them interested when everyone has such busy lives and busy work schedules, and this is especially difficult in a corporate club? Just wondering what any ideas you want to share into this recording, and maybe something that we can all take away to our clubs.
Well, you know what? I'm going to share the next. I'm going to jump through one slide and take you. Guess what next week's session is on? That's setting us up for the next week for the final slide around our seminar Sunday schedule. Next week is about motivating people. So how do you motivate people? Good question. Come back next week when we have our next week's seminar Sunday on the March the 17th, focusing on motivating people. And yes, there are a lot of key things. It's difficult when you're in a volunteer organization. People don't have to do this. The biggest thing that there's 3 key things. I'll talk about this in more detail next week. One of them is that there's the experience you get. You don't get this level of experience anywhere else in the world, where you get support, you get feedback, you get training, and you get to learn on the go, and you learn some skills that are valuable in life. So that's number 1. Number 2 is that you get to practice on some things that you are maybe uncomfortable with and haven't tried before. And so you get to test out some ideas and some thoughts in a relatively safe environment. You can't break too much in 1 year, especially being a leader, motivating people. And the third one, I'll save that for next week, but it has to do with some of the rewards that we get personally and the ability to give back. So the opportunity to give back is a key thing that I'd like some people take a great deal of pride in that they've learned some things and they want to give back. So we'll talk about those 3 and more next week in that. Any other questions?
I think it's important that we plan for the next year, that we're encouraging newer members to think about applying for executive roles or thinking about executive roles.
Absolutely. That's why we're having this session now, because the first meeting in May is when you need to have those club officer, when you should have the election, which means we only have a little less than 2 months between now and that first meeting in May. So now's the time to go out there and start to talk to the various members of your club about taking on these club officer roles. It's exactly why we're doing this. Thank you all again for attending today. Appreciate that. Our first ever Zoom-based Seminar Sunday. Next week will also be a Seminar Sunday on Zoom, and I will be hosting that one next week. It will be on motivating people. Come back and offer your opinions, thoughts, and comments on that. And the rest of the schedule towards now and the end of the year is up here on the screen. Take a look at that. You'll see the events are scheduled on the events page within Toastmasters, d21toastmasters.org, our website. And so you can see all those. You can register online for those and then join. Now that you're on Zoom, you should have no problem connecting up next week as well. Look forward to hearing from you next week. And if you have any questions along the way, feel free to send off some notes or questions to me. With that, I will end this meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.